The stars had never seemed so cold as they did on that terrible night 40 years ago. The colony ship New Dawn drifted through empty space, her engines dead, her lights flickering like a dying candle. 3,000 human souls huddled inside her metal walls, waiting for death that seemed certain to come. Captain Ruth Bradley stood on the bridge and stared at the endless darkness outside. Her ship had suffered a catastrophic failure in the worst possible place. They were far from any human outpost, far from any help, floating in a region of space that no human had ever mapped. The air recyclers would fail in 6 days. The food would run out in 10. It did not matter which came first. She had already recorded her final message to Earth. She had told her crew to spend time with their families, to hold their children, to say the things that needed to be said. There was nothing else to do but wait. Then the sensors detected something. A ship, massive and strange, emerged from the darkness and approached them slowly. Ruth felt her heart freeze. They had no weapons, no shields, nothing to defend themselves. If these aliens meant them harm, it would all be over very quickly. But the aliens did not attack. The ship that found them belonged to the Velrathi, a species humanity had never encountered. They were tall and slender, with skin like polished silver and eyes that glowed soft blue. They spoke no human language, but they understood fear. They understood desperation. They understood that the creatures inside that broken ship needed help. Elder Sorath commanded the Velrathi vessel. He was old even then, a leader among his people, respected for his wisdom and kindness. When his officers told him about the alien ship, when they explained that the creatures inside were dying, he did not hesitate. He ordered his people to help. The Velrathi were not wealthy. They faced their own problems, their own shortages. Helping these strange beings would cost them resources they could not easily replace. Some of his officers questioned the decision. They asked what the Velrathi would gain from this rescue. They asked why they should risk their own well-being for creatures they had never met. Elder Sorath looked at them with those gentle, glowing eyes. "Because they need us," he said. "What other reason could we ever need?" The Velrathi shared everything they had. They gave food to hungry humans. They gave medicine to sick humans. Their engineers worked beside human engineers to repair the broken engines. For 3 weeks, 2 species who could barely communicate worked together to save the New Dawn. When the repairs were complete, Elder Sorath gave Captain Bradley the coordinates to safe passage. He showed her the route back to human space. She tried to thank him, tried to offer something in return, but he simply placed his long silver hand over his heart and bowed his head. Ruth Bradley never forgot that gesture. Neither did any of the 3,000 humans who survived because of Velrathi kindness. They returned to Earth and told their story. They told their children told their children. The story of the Velrathi became part of human history, taught in every school, remembered in every heart. 40 years passed. Humanity grew strong. They built great ships and traveled to distant stars. They made alliances with some species and enemies of others. They became a power in the galaxy, respected and sometimes feared. But they never forgot the debt they owed. Captain Danny Cole served aboard the USS Intrepid, a warship patrolling the borders of human-allied space. He was a tall man with tired eyes and steady hands, known among his crew for his calm voice and fierce loyalty. His grandmother had been a child aboard the New Dawn. She had told him the story of the Velrathi so many times that he could recite it from memory. On a quiet evening, as his ship drifted through the darkness between stars, Danny received a priority transmission from Earth. The message came from Ambassador Greg Morton, humanity's representative to the Galactic Assembly. The ambassador's face was pale and tight with anger. "The Keth Dominion has declared the Velrathi homeworld unclaimed territory," Morton said. "They intend to annex it within the month." Danny felt something cold settle in his stomach. He knew about the Keth. Everyone did. They were conquerors, brutal and merciless. They had swallowed 11 species into their empire, crushing resistance with overwhelming force. They targeted civilians. They destroyed cultures. They showed no mercy because they saw mercy as weakness. "What about the assembly?" Danny asked. "Surely they will intervene." Morton shook his head. "The Velrathi are not members. They have no treaties, no alliances. Legally, no one is obligated to protect them." His voice cracked with frustration. "The other species are already calling it natural selection. They say the Velrathi are too naive, too trusting. They say this was inevitable." Danny thought about Elder Sorath. The old Velrathi was still alive, incredibly, still leading his peaceful people on their quiet world. They had no military. They had never built weapons. They believed that kindness would protect them, because they could not imagine any species repaying kindness with violence. They were about to learn how wrong they were. "What do you need from me?" Danny asked. Morton leaned closer to the camera. "I have sent a message to Earth. I told them what is happening. I told them that the Keth are going after the ones who saved us." He paused. "I need you to be ready, Danny. I need all of you to be ready." The transmission ended. Danny sat alone on his bridge, staring at the stars outside. Somewhere out there, the Velrathi were going about their peaceful lives, unaware that death was coming for them. Somewhere out there, the Keth were sharpening their weapons and preparing their ships. And somewhere on Earth, humans were receiving the news. Humans who had grown up hearing stories about silver-skinned aliens who saved their ancestors. Humans who had been taught from childhood that debts must be repaid, that loyalty is sacred, that those who help you in your darkest hour deserve everything you have to give. Danny did not know exactly what would happen next, but he knew one thing with absolute certainty. The Velrathi had helped humanity when no one else would. They had asked for nothing in return. They had simply seen people in need and chosen to act. Now humanity would show the galaxy what that kindness had earned. Lieutenant Lisa Tran entered the bridge and found her captain still sitting in the darkness. She was young and brilliant, the best tactical officer Danny had ever served with. She had already heard the news. "Orders, sir?" she asked quietly. Danny rose from his chair. His tired eyes had changed. There was fire in them now, cold and steady. "Set course for Velrath Prime," he said. "Maximum speed. And Lisa? Sir? Start studying everything we have on the Keth Dominion. Their ships, their tactics, their weaknesses." He turned to look at her. "We are going to need every advantage we can find." The USS Intrepid turned toward distant stars and began to move. Behind her, across 100 worlds, other humans were hearing the same news and feeling the same fire kindle in their hearts. The Velrathi had planted a seed of kindness 40 years ago. They were about to discover what had grown from it. The message from Ambassador Morton reached Earth on a Tuesday morning. By Tuesday afternoon, the entire planet knew what was happening. By Tuesday evening, humanity had made its decision. Admiral Sam Hutchins walked into the emergency session of the United Earth Council with heavy steps. He was an old soldier, gray-haired and scarred. A man who had seen too many battles and buried too many friends. He carried a single datapad containing the intelligence report about the Keth Dominion's intentions. He did not need to explain anything. Every council member already knew the story of the New Dawn. Every human child learned it before they learned to read. The Velrathi had saved 3,000 humans when they had no reason to do so. They had shared their food with strangers. They had repaired a broken ship. They had asked for nothing. Now those same gentle people faced extinction, and the galaxy expected humanity to do nothing. Admiral Hutchins placed his datapad on the table. "The Keth will reach Velrath Prime in approximately 3 weeks," he said. "They have assembled a strike force of 40 warships. The Velrathi have no military whatsoever. If we do not act, they will be destroyed." Council President Maria Santos looked around the room. "All in favor of military intervention?" Every hand rose. Every single one. The vote was recorded in 11 minutes. It was the fastest unanimous decision in the history of the United Earth Council. There was no debate, no hesitation, no discussion of costs or risks. Someone had threatened the people who saved humanity's ancestors, and humanity would answer. The orders went out within the hour. Across human space, military forces began to move. Ships that had been scheduled for decommission were pulled from storage and reactivated. Crews that had been on leave returned to their posts without being asked. Reserve personnel reported to duty stations before their orders even arrived. It seemed as though every human who could hold a weapon or pilot a ship wanted to be part of what was coming. But it was not just the military that responded. Civilian cargo vessels volunteered to carry supplies. Mining companies offered their transport ships. Private citizens with pilot licenses asked how they could help. Factories that had been producing consumer goods switched to manufacturing ammunition and repair parts. The entire human economy shifted in a matter of days, all focused on a single goal. Dr. Amy Lawson heard the news in her small apartment on Luna. She was 83 years old, her hair white and her hands unsteady. She had been the xenobiologist aboard the New Dawn all those decades ago. She had been the first human to shake Elder Soreth's hand, the first to look into those gentle glowing eyes and see the kindness there. She contacted the military recruitment office and demanded transport to Velrath Prime. The young officer on the other end tried to explain that she was too old, that the journey was too dangerous, that there was nothing she could do. Amy Lawson fixed him with a stare that made him forget every regulation he had ever learned. "I shook Elder Soreth's hand," she said. "I watched him save my people when he had nothing to gain. I will not let him die alone. Find me a ship." They found her a ship. On the USS Intrepid, Lieutenant Lisa Tran worked without sleep. She studied everything humanity knew about the Keth Dominion. Their ship designs, their battle tactics, their command structure, their previous conquests. The Keth were brutal but predictable. They relied on overwhelming force and psychological terror. They targeted civilians to break the will of their enemies. They had never faced an opponent willing to fight to the last breath. Lisa found weaknesses, small ones, but real. The Keth shield generators had a flaw in their frequency modulation. Their communication systems were centralized, making them vulnerable to targeted strikes. Their commanders were arrogant, trained to expect easy victories against helpless prey. She brought her findings to Captain Danny Cole. He read through her analysis in silence, then looked up at her with those steady eyes. "Can we beat them?" he asked. Lisa hesitated. "We can hurt them, sir. Badly. But we are outnumbered, and reinforcements will take time to arrive. It depends on how long we need to hold. Then we hold as long as necessary," Danny said simply. On Velrath Prime, a small team of human engineers worked alongside their Velrathi hosts. They had been sent there months ago as part of a cultural exchange program, helping the peaceful aliens upgrade their infrastructure. Among them was Megan Cole, Danny's younger sister, a civilian engineer with bright eyes and a quick smile. Megan had fallen in love with the Velrathi, not romantic love, but something deeper. She loved their gentleness, their curiosity, their absolute faith in the goodness of others. They treated every visitor as a friend. They shared everything they had without hesitation. They could not comprehend the idea that anyone would want to hurt them. When the news arrived about the Keth, Megan watched the Velrathi try to understand. They did not panic or scream. They simply looked confused, like children learning for the first time that monsters were real. Elder Soreth called Megan to his chambers. He was ancient now. His silver skin faded to pale gray. His blue eyes dim but still kind. He moved slowly, supported by attendants. But his mind remained sharp. "Your people are coming," he said. It was not a question. Megan nodded. "Every ship we have, Elder, every soldier, every pilot, everyone who can fight." The old Velrathi was quiet for a long moment. "We saved one ship," he said softly. 3,000 of your people, lost and dying. We gave them food. We gave them hope. We asked for nothing." "I know," Megan said. Elder Soreth reached out and took her hand in his. His fingers were long and thin, cool against her skin. "I hoped it would be remembered," he whispered. "I hoped that the kindness we showed would echo somehow, somewhere. But I never imagined this." Tears rolled down his aged face. Megan held his hand and let her own tears fall. Across the galaxy, the Galactic Assembly watched in confusion. Their observers sent reports that made no sense. Humanity was mobilizing for war on a scale never seen before, And they were doing it for a species that was not even their ally. They were risking everything for a debt that was 40 years old. Several ambassadors sent inquiries to Earth, asking for explanations. What did humanity hope to gain? What strategic advantage justified this expense? What did the Velrothi have that was worth dying for? The response from Earth was always the same. They helped us when no one else would. We remember. The ambassadors did not understand. Gratitude was an emotion, not a policy. Loyalty was a personal feeling, not a reason for war. They filed their reports and noted that humans were apparently irrational, driven by sentiment rather than logic. They did not realize that this was not weakness. This was not foolishness. This was humanity at its most dangerous. The Keth Dominion's advance fleet entered Velrothi space on schedule, confident and unhurried. They had done this many times before. They expected terrified civilians. They expected empty skies. They expected another easy conquest to add to their growing empire. They were about to learn that they had made a terrible mistake. The Keth Vanguard dropped out of faster-than-light travel and found something they did not expect. Between their fleet and the blue-green world of Velroth Prime, 15 human warships hung motionless in the darkness, their weapons powered and their shields raised. Commander Vreth stood on the bridge of his flagship and stared at the human vessels with a mixture of confusion and contempt. 15 ships. The humans had sent 15 ships to challenge the might of the Keth Dominion. Either they were incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Vreth had conquered 6 worlds personally. He had watched entire civilizations crumble before his fleet. He had never once faced serious resistance because no one ever came to help the weak. That was the way of the universe. The strong devoured the weak, and the weak died alone. He opened a communication channel. Human vessels, you are interfering with Dominion operations. Withdraw immediately or be destroyed. The response came from a human male with tired eyes and a calm voice. Captain Danny Cole sat in his command chair aboard the USS Intrepid, surrounded by his crew, facing a force that outnumbered him nearly 3-1. This world is under the protection of the United Earth Federation, Danny said. The people here are our friends. You are advised to withdraw immediately. Vreth laughed. The sound echoed across his bridge, and his officers laughed with him. Friends. The humans had come to die for friends. How pathetic. How utterly foolish. You cannot be serious, Vreth said. 15 ships against the Dominion? Your species must have a death wish. Danny did not smile. His voice remained steady, almost conversational. We are completely serious. The Velrothi helped us once, long ago. We will not abandon them now. If you want this world, you will have to go through us. Vreth ended the communication. He was done talking. These humans would learn what happened to those who challenged the Keth. He ordered his fleet forward, expecting the human ships to scatter and run. They did not move. The Keth ships advanced, weapons charging, shields reinforced. Still, the humans held their position. Vreth felt a flicker of unease. No species had ever stood against his fleet like this. They always ran. They always begged. They always died screaming for mercy. The humans simply waited. Lieutenant Lisa Tran watched her tactical display and counted the seconds. She had studied the Keth for days without sleep, analyzing every battle they had ever fought. She knew their patterns, their weaknesses, their arrogance. She knew exactly when they would fire and exactly where their shields would be weakest. Now, she said quietly, the human fleet opened fire in perfect coordination. 15 ships struck as one, their weapons targeting the exact points Lisa had identified. Energy beams cut through Keth shields like knives through paper. 3 cruisers lost power in the first exchange. A 4th exploded in a brilliant flash of light. For a moment, the Keth fleet simply stopped. They could not understand what had happened. No enemy had ever hit them this hard, this fast, this precisely. Commander Vreth stared at his tactical display and felt something he had not felt in decades. Fear. He ordered a retreat. His remaining ships pulled back, regrouping at a safe distance while damage reports flooded in. The humans had disabled or destroyed nearly a quarter of his vanguard in a single exchange. It was impossible. It was humiliating. On the bridge of the Intrepid, Danny allowed himself a small breath of relief. They had won the first battle, but he knew it was not over. The Keth would return with more ships, more weapons, more anger. This was only the beginning. Status report, he said. Lisa checked her displays. Minor damage to 3 vessels, no casualties. The Keth are holding position at the edge of the system. Danny nodded. They will call for reinforcements. We need to be ready. On Velrath Prime below, the people watched the sky with wonder and confusion. They had seen the flashes of light, the distant explosions, the evidence of battle in the heavens above their peaceful world. They did not understand war. They had never needed to. Megan Cole worked with Velrathi engineers to establish emergency shelters. If the fighting reached the surface, the people would need places to hide. The Velrathi helped her without complaint, but their hands trembled, and their eyes kept drifting upward. Why do they do this? One young Velrathi asked her. Your people, I mean. Why do they fight for us? Megan paused in her work. She thought about her brother up there in the darkness, facing enemies he had never met for people he barely knew. She thought about her grandmother's stories, about the new dawn and the silver-skinned aliens who had saved 3,000 human lives. Because you saved us, she said simply. A long time ago, your people found a ship full of dying humans. You could have ignored them. You could have let them die. No one would have blamed you. But you didn't. You helped them. You fed them. You gave them hope when they had none. The young Velrathi listened with wide eyes. Humans never forget that kind of kindness, Megan continued. We carry it with us forever. We teach it to our children. We write it in our histories. And when the time comes to repay that kindness, we do not hesitate. Elder Soreth arrived at the shelter site, supported by his attendants. He moved slowly, but his eyes were bright with emotion. Dr. Amy Lawson walked beside him, having finally arrived on a transport ship that had pushed its engines beyond safe limits to reach Velrath Prime in time. Amy was exhausted from the journey, but she stood straight and strong. She had waited 40 years for this moment. She would not show weakness now. Elder Soreth, she said, her voice thick with emotion. Do you remember me? The old Velrathi looked at her for a long moment, then recognition dawned in his faded blue eyes. The young scientist, he whispered. From the broken ship. You were the first to speak to us. Amy took his hand. You gave us back our future, she said. Did you think we would forget? Above them, the stars flickered with distant fire. The Keth had begun probing attacks, testing the human defenses, searching for weaknesses. The human ships responded to each assault with deadly precision, but they were taking damage now. Crews were injured, systems were failing, but they held the line. The Galactic Assembly sent observers to watch the battle. They recorded everything, sending reports back to species across the galaxy. No one could understand what they were seeing. Humanity was bleeding for the Velrathi. Humans were dying for creatures who could not fight back. For a debt that was 40 years old. One observer, a diplomat from a species that had surrendered to the Keth decades ago, watched the human ships hold their position against overwhelming odds. He saw the flashes of weapons fire, the explosions of disabled vessels, the stubborn refusal to retreat. He sent a single message back to his homeworld. The humans remember everything. Everything. Perhaps we chose wrong when we surrendered. Perhaps there was another way. Commander Vreeth received word that reinforcements were coming. The full might of the Keth Dominion would arrive within days. 200 warships. Enough firepower to crack the planet itself. He opened a channel to the human fleet one more time. Your reinforcements will never arrive in time, he said. You cannot win this. Surrender now, and we may show mercy. Captain Danny Cole looked at the stars outside his bridge. He thought about his grandmother, about the stories she had told him, about the gentle aliens who had saved her life. He thought about his sister on the planet below, counting on him to protect her. "We will not surrender," he said. "We will not retreat. If you want this world, you will have to kill every single one of us. And even then, more will come, because this is what humanity does. We remember, we repay, and we never, ever give up." The channel closed. The waiting began. Danny did not know if they could survive what was coming. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. They would not abandon the Velrathi. Not while a single human ship could still fight. The Keth reinforcements arrived like a dark cloud spreading across the stars. 200 warships, their hulls black as midnight, their weapons glowing with terrible energy. It was the largest fleet the Dominion had ever assembled for a single conquest. Commander Vreth looked upon his armada and felt certain that nothing could stand against it. The human defense fleet was battered and bleeding. 9 of their original 15 ships were still functional. The others drifted in space, their crews evacuated. Their systems destroyed. Captain Danny Cole had not slept in 3 days. His eyes were red, and his hands were unsteady, but his voice remained calm. "All ships, prepare for final engagement," he said. "It has been an honor serving with each of you." Lisa Tran looked at her captain with steady eyes. She had known from the beginning that this moment would come. They were outnumbered more than 20 to 1. There was no tactical brilliance that could overcome those odds. This would be their last stand. On Velrath Prime below, the people gathered in the shelters that Megan Cole had helped build. They held each other and prayed to gods they thought had abandoned them. Elder Sorath sat among them, his ancient hands folded in his lap, his eyes closed. He did not pray for himself. He prayed for the humans who were about to die for his people. Dr. Amy Lawson sat beside him. She was too old to be afraid. She had lived a full life. She had seen wonders and horrors in equal measure. If this was how it ended, she would face it with dignity. "I am sorry," Elder Sorath whispered. "We brought this upon you. If we had not saved your ship all those years ago, you would not be here now." Amy shook her head. "Never apologize for kindness, Elder. Whatever happens today, you made the right choice. You showed us that the universe could be gentle. That alone was worth everything." Commander Vreth ordered his fleet forward. 200 warships advanced on 9 damaged human vessels. He expected the humans to scatter or surrender. He expected them to beg for mercy like every other species had. Instead, they charged. The 9 human ships accelerated directly toward the Keth armada, their weapons firing continuously, their shields flashing under the assault. It was insane. It was suicide. It was the most terrifying thing Vreth had ever seen. And then, the sensors screamed. Behind the Keth fleet, space itself seemed to tear open. Ships emerged from faster-than-light travel in numbers that made Vreth's blood turn cold. Battleships, carriers, destroyers, frigates, vessels of every size and configuration, appearing from every direction like a storm of steel and fire. 300 human warships, the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled. Admiral Sam Hutchins stood on the bridge of his command ship, the USS Resolute, and watched his fleet take formation. Every ship had pushed its engines beyond safe limits to reach Velrath Prime in time. Every crew had volunteered for this mission. They had come from every corner of human space, united by a single purpose. The Admiral opened a transmission that played on every frequency. His voice was calm and cold. "To the Keth Dominion. You have threatened a people under our protection. These are the Velrathi, who saved 3,000 human lives when they had nothing to gain. They are our friends, they are our family, and you have made a terrible mistake." Vreth stared at his tactical display in disbelief. The humans had been playing for time. They had sacrificed their ships, their crews, their lives, just to hold the Keth in place long enough for their main fleet to arrive. It was madness. No species would pay such a price for another. "This is your only warning," Admiral Hutchins continued. "Leave now, or we will demonstrate exactly how humanity repays its debts." Vreth hesitated. For the first time in his long career, he considered retreat. But the Dominion had never retreated. Their entire empire was built on the principle that strength was absolute, that mercy was weakness, that the strong must always crush the weak. He ordered a full assault. The battle that followed would be remembered for centuries. Human ships fought with terrifying coordination, their weapons striking in patterns that seemed almost choreographed. They knew exactly where to hit and when to hit it. Lisa Tran had shared her tactical analysis with the entire fleet, and every captain had memorized every weakness. The Keth shields flickered and failed. Their weapons missed targets that seemed to know where they would fire. Their communications were jammed, their commanders unable to coordinate. The beautiful dark armada that had seemed so invincible was being torn apart piece by piece. On the Intrepid, Captain Danny Cole pushed his damaged ship back into the fight. His engines were failing. His shields were gone. Half his crew was injured. But he refused to withdraw. "Target that command ship," he ordered. "All power to weapons." Lisa obeyed without question. The Intrepid lurched toward Commander Vreth's flagship, firing everything it had. Other human ships saw what they were doing and joined the assault. Within minutes, the Keth command ship was burning. Vreth died at his post. His last sight, the impossible image of humans sacrificing themselves for aliens they barely knew. He never understood it. He never could. The battle lasted 18 hours. When it was over, more than half the Keth fleet was destroyed. The survivors fled in panic, their formation broken, their confidence shattered. They had never lost like this. They had never faced an enemy willing to die for someone else. On Velrath Prime, the people emerged from their shelters and looked up at the sky. The stars were quiet now. The flashes of battle had faded, but above them, human ships still orbited, damaged and scarred, standing guard over a world they had bled to protect. Megan Cole found a communication station and called her brother. Danny's face appeared on the screen, exhausted and bleeding from a cut on his forehead, but alive. Alive. "We did it," he said quietly. "They're gone." Megan burst into tears. She could not find words. She just stood there, crying, while her brother smiled at her from the ruins of his bridge. Elder Soreth walked out of the shelter on unsteady legs. He looked up at the stars, at the human ships that had come to save his people. Tears streamed down his ancient silver face. "I planted a seed," he whispered, "and they grew a forest." Dr. Amy Lawson helped him stand. She was crying too. Everyone was crying. The impossible had happened. Kindness had been repaid. Loyalty had been rewarded. The gentle Velrathi would survive. Admiral Hutchins surveyed his fleet from the bridge of the Resolute. They had won, but the cost was high. Many ships were damaged beyond repair. Many good people would never go home. He recorded their names in his personal log, every single one, so that they would never be forgotten. Then he opened a channel to Earth. "Velrath Prime is secure," he said. "The Keth Dominion has been defeated. Our people fought with honor. Our debt has been repaid." Across the galaxy, the news spread like wildfire. The other species heard what humanity had done. They heard about the 300 ships, the 18-hour battle, the stubborn refusal to retreat. They heard about a debt from 40 years ago, paid in blood and fire. And for the first time, many of them began to understand something important about humanity. They were not just strong. They were not just stubborn. They were loyal in ways that other species could not comprehend. And they never, ever forgot. The aftermath of the Battle of Velrath Prime reshaped the galaxy in ways that no one could have predicted. The Keth Dominion, which had seemed invincible for so long, began to crumble almost immediately. Word of their defeat spread across the stars, and the species they had conquered saw something they had never seen before. Weakness. On a dozen worlds, rebellions began. Populations that had surrendered decades ago found new courage. They had watched humans die for strangers. They had seen what loyalty could accomplish. If the Keth could be beaten, they could be beaten again. And again, and again. Within a decade, the Dominion collapsed entirely. Their empire fractured into warring remnants that could never threaten anyone again. The species they had oppressed rebuilt their cultures and their pride. Some of them reached out to humanity, seeking friendship with the people who had shown them what true strength looked like. On Velrath Prime, reconstruction began under the protection of the United Earth Federation. Human engineers worked alongside Velrathi scholars to repair the damage from the battle. Ships were salvaged, buildings were rebuilt, and slowly, the peaceful world returned to something like normal. But the Velrathi would never forget what had happened. They could not. Elder Sorath stood before his people in the great gathering hall of their capital city. He was ancient now. His silver skin faded to almost white, his blue eyes dim but filled with joy. Beside him stood Dr. Amy Lawson, Captain Danny Cole, his sister Megan, Admiral Sam Hutchins, and 100 other humans who had come to witness this moment. The United Earth Federation had offered the Velrathi full membership in their alliance network. It was not a gesture of charity or pity. It was recognition. The Velrathi had proven something important 40 years ago, something that humanity would never forget. Elder Sorath's voice was weak, but it carried across the silent hall. When we found the new dawn drifting in the darkness, we did not know who these strange beings were. We did not know their language or their culture or their history. We only knew that they were dying and that we could help. He paused, gathering his strength. Some of my officers questioned the decision. They asked what we would gain. They asked why we should risk our resources for creatures we had never met. I told them that kindness needs no reason. I told them that helping those in need is its own reward. His eyes swept across the gathered humans. I hoped that our kindness would be remembered. I hoped that somewhere, somehow, it would make a difference, but I never imagined this. His voice cracked with emotion. I saved 3,000 humans, and 300 million came to save us. He reached out his trembling hand and took the treaty document from Admiral Hutchins. With careful deliberation, he signed his name at the bottom, binding his people to humanity forever. The hall erupted in cheers. Humans and Velrathi embraced each other, tears flowing freely. It was a moment of pure joy, of hope restored, of faith in the universe rewarded. Ambassador Greg Morton traveled to the Galactic Assembly to address the gathered species. They watched him with a mixture of fear and fascination. They had seen what humanity could do when provoked. They had seen the fire and the fury, the 300 ships and the 18-hour battle. They wanted to understand. Morton stood at the podium and looked out at the assembled ambassadors. He saw their nervousness, their calculation, their attempts to figure out how to avoid becoming the next target of human anger. He almost smiled. You asked why we fought for the Velrathi, he began. You calculated the cost, the risk, the strategic value, and you found no logical reason. That is because you do not understand us. He let the silence stretch. Humanity never forgets a kindness. We carry our debts across generations, across centuries if we must. The Velrathi saved our people when they had nothing to gain. They fed the hungry, they healed the sick, they gave hope to the hopeless, and they asked for nothing in return. His voice hardened. We remember that. We will always remember that. Our children will remember it. Their children will remember it. 1,000 years from now, humans will still tell the story of Elder Sorath and the New Dawn. It is part of who we are. He looked around the assembly, meeting the eyes of species that had watched the Velrathi face extinction and done nothing. And we remember cruelty just as long. The Keth learned that lesson. Their empire is in ruins because they thought kindness was weakness. They thought loyalty was foolishness. They thought they could hurt our friends without consequence. His voice dropped to something barely above a whisper, but it carried to every corner of the room. They were wrong. We do not recommend anyone else test us. The assembly was silent. The ambassadors looked at each other with new understanding. Humanity was not irrational. They were not sentimental fools. They were something far more dangerous, a species that believed in something beyond themselves. Captain Danny Cole retired from active service 2 years after the battle. His ship, the USS Intrepid, was too damaged to repair, but it was not scrapped. Instead, it was placed in orbit around Velrath Prime as a memorial, a permanent reminder of the humans who had given everything to protect the innocent. Danny visited occasionally, looking up at the scarred hull of his old ship, remembering the crew members who had died, honoring their sacrifice. He never forgot their names. He never forgot their faces. He carried them with him always. His sister Megan stayed on Velroth Prime. She fell in love with the peaceful world and its gentle people. She helped build schools where Velrothi children learned about the universe beyond their planet. And in every school, the first lesson was always the same: the story of the new dawn and the humans who remembered. Dr. Amy Lawson passed away peacefully 2 years after the battle. Surrounded by friends both human and Velrothi, Elder Sorath was at her bedside, holding her hand as she took her final breath. She had lived to see the debt repaid. She had lived to see kindness triumph. She died with a smile on her face. The Velrothi began teaching their children a new story. It was added to their histories, their songs, their prayers. It went like this: long ago, we found a ship full of humans who were lost and dying. We had nothing to gain by helping them. We had no reason to risk our resources or our safety. But we helped them anyway, because that is what kindness means. We fed them. We healed them. We gave them hope. And when darkness came for us, when an empire of conquerors descended upon our world with weapons we could not fight, the humans returned. They came from across the stars in ships of fire and steel. They stood between us and annihilation. They bled for us. They died for us. They saved us. Because humans never forget. They never forget kindness, and they never forget cruelty. They carry both across the generations like sacred flames. To be their friend is to be protected forever. To be their enemy is to face a wrath that can shake worlds. And sometimes, in a universe full of darkness and violence, that is the most beautiful and the most terrifying thing imaginable. The stars are cold and vast, but humanity walks among them now. And wherever they go, they carry the memory of the Velrothi with them. They carry the lesson that Elder Sorath taught them long ago. Kindness matters. Loyalty matters. Debts must be repaid. And humanity never, ever forgets.